Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Cat's Track. Thank you for subscribing, liking, and sharing this with your friends. Today's episode is with my friend Rachel Wade. She was born in Calgary and loves it here. Rachel has a great partner, Ron, a dog, and 2 cats. She's also a proud auntie with nieces and nephews located in Calgary and Toronto. Besides Rachel's loved ones, she's passionate about creating belonging and equity from both a cultural and systemic perspective, working towards a sustainable existence, which she does through her nonprofit work with Calgary Wildlife Rehabilitation Society, Imagine Cities, and the United Way of Calgary. Friends, you'll find her full bio attached. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to connecting. I've got my matcha tea, so I'm all ready to go.
Well done. I love matcha tea, super healthy too.
Yeah, it's a must-have for me in the morning now. It was one of those things that I had to learn how to make on my own once everything went into lockdown. So now I'm proficient at it. Yeah.
So what's in it? How do you make it? I don't know how to make things on my own. So how do you do it? What's in it?
Well, there's like a little kit you can get kind of anywhere, but you put a little bit of the matcha in, you push it through a strainer using what I have, the traditional bamboo spoon, which also gives you the right amount of matcha with each scoop.
Cool.
And then you pour a little bit of hot water. You use a whisk, that's a bamboo whisk, and you froth it. And then I like to warm up some cashew milk and add that in to make a latte.
So. Ooh, now that sounds awesome.
Yeah, so it's like my own little coffee shop at home now.
For you. Yes, we've had to become much more independent.
Yes, and learn new skills and how to do things on our own. So
God forbid, I didn't want to ever learn that. Awesome. Well, you ready for the questions we sent you?
Yeah, I think so.
Cool. The greatest challenge that you've had in the last few months?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this, and I think, there's lots of sort of micro and macro challenges that everybody is facing, and we're kind of interconnected in ways as well as disconnected in ways that we haven't been before. And I think for me, one of the biggest ways that is a thread throughout different themes of my life is having to stay current on the constant changing landscape around us. And so I think about that with COVID and how there are constant health updates. And if you're wanting to travel, what does that look like in another province or another country and here? And tracking that with friends and family near and far who are in different places where we might be worried about them. Tracking it here around operations for planning for the future. Myself, for example, was planning a wedding in the middle of all this. So that has been completely shifted and changed. And lots of questions around when is the new date and things like that. So just, on a personal lens there, but also from, just a health and safety perspective in the workplace, making sure that there is mental health as well as physical health within all of that. So there's just, constant updates and constant changes. And I think that can make it challenging to look ahead to the future because it's really hard to plan things. And so that can make it hard to look forward to things. So finding other ways to occupy our time and to stay safe while we're doing it. So for me, I think that's a big part. I also think about my work in diversity and inclusion. And there are constant updates and changes there in that part of the space of the world right now as well. It wasn't too long ago that we had the murder of George Floyd. And so there has been a lot of activity around what that looks like in the diversity and inclusion space, both as a professional and as a personal ally as well. So keeping up to date with what is a responsible way to react to that? How do you be supportive to those around you? And those sort of things as well. So it's just, there seems to be just a constant influx of updates in our newsreels around whether it's opinions or facts or updates from our government or updates from friends and family. So it's just a lot, I think, to take in, and I think to sift through and to make sure that we're focusing on the right things at the right times.
I love it. That actually reminds me of a book that I'm listening to right now. Have you read it yet? It's Malcolm Gladwell's latest book called Talking to Strangers.
I haven't read it yet. I do love Malcolm Gladwell, though. I find a lot of his work really insightful. I listen to a lot of his podcasts too, like Revisionist History. I find him really insightful. I don't always agree with everything he says, but he always gets me thinking for sure. And I haven't listened to that one yet. What is the part of that reminds you of that book?
And specifically around why he goes deep into history and has several different examples per chapter with how people or groups of people have misunderstood another person or group of people and the reasons why. It's absolutely fascinating. And of course, you and I both know it's a lot of it. We bring our own biases and then the many different reasons why that happens. So I strongly recommend it. I think with how curious you are about that, I think you'll really find it interesting.
Yeah, I've heard good things about it. It's definitely on my reading list. So that's a good one to, a good reminder to bump it up the list maybe. So
That's awesome. Cool. And your three things that you'd like to share today?
yeah, this is another one that I tried to be a bit reflective on before our conversation today, because I think there's so many different directions that we can go on. And again, with that influx of information that's sort of coming at us all the time right now. And for me, I think how I'd like to frame that is around care. So I think there's sort of three levels of care that we can be mindful and intentional around right now, which is self-care, care for others, and then care for society at a larger level. So I guess I'll just go through each of those and what I've been pondering or thinking about with those topics. But I think with self-care right now, it's really important that, the age-old saying of put your own oxygen mask on first, but there really is a space where people are struggling to identify their own emotions right now. They're struggling to understand this moving landscape. They're struggling to look forward to things, kind of like I mentioned before. And I really think that it's important for people to take that space and take that accountability and ownership to know that they can put themselves first at this point in time and at this point in history, and that self-care really matters. And that's going to also look different for different people. And sometimes I think we can easily jump to judgment around what people's self-care looks like or what they need. And so I think we have to pause that as well, and pause our own judgment of ourselves and that own little like nagging voice in our head that tells us to do more and to buck up and to just keep moving. And sometimes you just need to cut that voice out and listen to yourself and pause and be reflective around what do you need right now. And that might be from a nutrition standpoint. That might mean canceling plans tonight because you really do just need some space to yourself. That might mean taking enjoyment in, connecting with someone in your bubble and getting some love from one of your nieces or nephews. Sometimes I do that. But I think that we all need to be a bit more reflective about that and pause and give ourselves the leeway to take what we need to get through this space and time where a lot of us are going flat out and a lot of us are, burning the candle at both ends on top of a whole bunch of uncertainty that is surrounding us right now. So that's sort of my first one. I think the second one, which is care for others, for me, that one really is talking about allyship in a really micro way. So when I think about that, I think more about our immediate circles, those people that are around us, people that we actually have the ability to reach out and talk to. Because certainly there's allyship in different ways, which I'll get to. But, and that means also really venturing into the space of empathy and compassion and curiosity too. So if instead of assuming that we know what other people are going through or knowing what other people need, it's really pausing that in that space to ask and to ask how people are doing. It also means flexing those courage muscles a little bit as well, because a lot of times what I'm seeing is a bit of allyship paralysis. So we talk about that in business all the time, right? About analysis paralysis, and that we just have to kind of at some point pull the trigger and move forward and then pivot as we go and learn as we go. And the same thing I think is true for allies, because we're hearing the space where people are saying, I need you to stick up for me. I need you to speak up for me. I need you to stand next to me. And allies are trying to show up and they want to be there and they want to do the right thing. But sometimes it's hard because they don't want to say the wrong thing and make it worse, or say the wrong thing and even just make it awkward, especially in the workplace or if you're a leader. So these can be really challenging times and conversations for people who want to be there but don't know how. And so my advice for that is always to do some research. So, I mean, there's Google, it's very accessible. There is, even Instagram has tons of different pages and things that talk about very specialized topics or whatever your game is, whether it's books or peer-reviewed journals. I mean, there's lots out there. So take some time for the areas that are of interest to you and where you want to start stepping up a little bit more and do that research. And that's so that you can do it responsibly. And that will also give you the confidence that you're not going to say an overtly awful thing to someone by accident, but then venture into that space and connect with people that you want to be there for and to understand better from. So that's, I think, sort of the other piece is I'd really like to encourage people to take up that mantle of acting out and being an intentional ally in their own circles and their own spaces. So whether that's the workplace, whether that's with your family, whether that's with your friend groups, whether that's even just with acquaintances, and checking in on people and making sure that they're doing okay. When the Black Lives Matter movement was moving, when that was first really coming to fruition, I did hear feedback from a number of people that are in my networks of various spaces and places from the Black community, that they were alarmed or shocked at the number of people that didn't reach out, knowing that there are really traumatic images out there right now and that there's a lot that they're carrying from a weight standpoint mentally. So I would just encourage people to just keep those things in mind as we navigate different spaces and places in this constantly moving landscape, and bring that from the back of the mind to the front of the mind and try to challenge yourself to move into those spaces courageously. And then there's sort of care for society at large. And I think that right now, I mean, we're recording this, I don't know when you'll be posting it, but we're recording it on election day in the US. And I think there can be this really big sentiment that it's hard to also venture into these spaces because it's so divisive. And I was thinking about that a little bit today, and I think there is room for hope and for bringing that together and focusing on that in a bit of a different way. And that's why I'm focusing this around care. So this doesn't have to be about one political agenda over another. What we can look at is how do we care for one another in these spaces. And I know that there is a call to action from a lot of different groups and different perspectives around allyship. I know different organizations too, from a corporate standpoint, have been called out, for putting out a statement and maybe not backing it up. So I would encourage organizations to be reflective also on what they want their legacy to be and how do they want to show up in these spaces, and then to just be really vulnerable and honest about that, and then start moving and creating action. And we hear this term systemic a lot right now. We've heard it with systemic racism. It doesn't have to just do with race, though. You can talk about systemic exclusion in general. And there is an opportunity when we're looking at care for society is how do we just, even if we get away from that word systemic, how do we just create spaces and places and policies and systems that create opportunity and remove barriers for different groups of people? And so that's what that's really about. And so I just wanted to leave that nugget out there today too, so people could start thinking about that in maybe a way that's a little bit more approachable or broken down. But that is really what that's about. It's about creating opportunity for different groups of people and evaluating the age-old, like, well, this is how we've always done it, right? And not letting that be enough for us to just sit on our laurels because of that, and instead actually reevaluate that maybe there are more innovative ways we could do it by bringing different people to the table. We might have new insights and new ways of approaching things that really give us an edge, whether that's in the business world or otherwise. So those are, when I was thinking about where are we at today and kind of where the world is at, I really want us to lean into care through empathy, curiosity, innovation, through allyship. And
I love it. I love it. Well done, Rachel. I love it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And how about your legacy or good news or anything you've got in closing?
Good news or closing? Well, I mean, I am just excited to be about part of the conversation right now. I'm really fortunate in that I get to work in a space where it touches internationally from a diversity and inclusion space. So I'm really hopeful around where things are headed. I love seeing how much momentum there is in this space right now. A lot of people are paying attention. People who have maybe thought about it before are now taking action. So I think there are great things on the horizon. I think there's a lot of work ahead of us, and I think we have to keep momentum moving, but I think there are great things ahead for all of us.
Well said. Well said. And I agree. I am hopeful for the future. I think that the last few months have helped us all realize what's really important. And thank you for shining the light on all of that, especially around care for all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Everyone, that was Rachel Wade. Thank you so much for joining us on Cast Track, and we'll see you in the next one. Have a great day.